Hi guys, welcome to another video, and in this lesson we're looking at the term evolution. Evolution basically means that simple organisms evolved into more complex organisms. So millions and billions of years ago, it's believed that organisms were quite simple compared to the complex ones that we see today. So those organisms must have changed, they must have evolved over time. There's two scientists who you need to know about their theories of evolution. The first scientist is Charles Darwin, probably the more famous of the two. And Charles Darwin suggested his theory of natural selection. But at the time that Darwin presented his idea of natural selection, he had a hard time getting this theory accepted. One of the reasons Darwin had a tough time getting his theory accepted was due to the belief in God and religion. People weren't quite ready to move away from this idea that God had created all living beings. Another reason that Darwin's ideas may not have been accepted, it was just the fact that he couldn't explain the how. He couldn't explain how these simple organisms had changed or evolved into more complex ones. But then he had never heard of chromosomes or genetics. It was quite unheard of. So he couldn't explain the how. And thirdly, he couldn't convince other scientists. At the time, science wasn't really focusing on this change in organisms. So he had a hard time trying to convince other scientists about his findings of natural selection. The other scientist is called Marx. Now, what Marx said about evolution was that he says that the more you use a characteristic, the stronger or longer it becomes. So, for example, if a rabbit was to use its hind legs to escape predators, then those hind legs would become stronger and also become longer. And what Marx said is that those characteristics would be passed on to the rabbit's offspring. Lamarck's theory of evolution was quickly put away with, as it couldn't prove through experiments and testing that it backed up the theory. So his theory was not accepted. Whereas today, Darwin's theory of natural selection is the chosen theory of evolution, as we found out more about genetics and chromosomes. But something called mutations can lead to evolution. A mutation is just a random change in DNA. Now, most of the time, these mutations are harmless and they don't really bring about any physical changes that we can see. But sometimes these mutations may produce a characteristic which is favourable to the environment. If that mutation is favourable to the environment, it can then be passed on to the offspring. Now, if this happens over a long period of time, it could eventually change the whole species. Okay guys, thanks for tuning in. Stay in touch for another video.